Please allow me to introduce Leslie Olmstead, Director of Mineral Rights for Cobalt Metals. She has been a huge proponent for PX4. She has been one of the reasons we have advanced as much as we advanced. She gives great quality feedback, constructive criticism. You are lucky to have her on your team and by your side. So thank you for being here, Leslie.
So thank you. Some of you I know, some of you I'm meeting for the first time. I have no idea what I'm going to say today.
You just so.
Izzy made this up for me. But the first thing I want to say is, so the way that I came to PX4 is important because it's how I view PX4. So I met Toby and Billy in 2022 at the Alaska Mining Association. And I was introduced to them by a geologist that I worked with at Tech. And he's like, hey, you need to check out this program. And I think maybe I had 5 minutes of looking at the program. And I was like, holy God, this is so intuitive. And one of the things that really drew me to it was the fact that it was intuitive. I know most of you have jobs that involve very limited bandwidth and such a limit on bandwidth that to have to go through a week long of training or to have to use a user's manual or have to do many of these things just to get your information into a system so that you can then see it, but then you have all kinds of questions afterwards that you then need to use a user's manual to answer is really a shoot me in the head moment. And so some of these things might seem odd, but what's our next slide here?
Benefits. What you like about working with us?
Yeah, so highly intuitive. So I looked at this for 5 minutes, and then that was in 2022. I had a few other conversations with Toby and Billy, and then I think right around early 23, I started to look at the program a little bit. And then I ended up leaving Tech and went to Cobalt Metals. And while I was at Cobalt, I was asked if you had, we need some type of software program to manage and help keep track of all of the land assets. And so I was asked, what would you like to do? So we looked at there were 3 programs that came up as possibilities. One was eliminated immediately because just no. And then I talked with the head of data ops at Cobalt, who is also related to Sean, his wife. She is lovely, has a brain that amazing. And we started to look at and test drive PX4. And within an hour's time of using it, it was like, this has so many capabilities and ability for expansion. And again, she didn't have to know anything about being a landman in order to understand this program. So highly intuitive. The support team and the receptiveness. So from very early on, I have said, after I got into the system, this needs to be different. You could change this. What about this? And there's always been a constant dialogue back and forth. The user interface and the back button. This seems like one of the most insignificant, almost trivial pieces of this program, but it isn't. And this is the difference. The simple inclusion of a back button tells me that these guys understand that when I am doing something that I might be 10 minutes in and I'm going to have another emergency, because most of us work for land companies where there's only 1 or 2 of us at most, and we're managing 6 million plus acres. So the inclusion of the back button, I can always go back to where I was, where some of the other programs You're not able to. And so I can leave this open on my computer for a day, for 2 days, for like the end of the week, and I can come back to it like, what was I doing? It was like, oh, I hit the back button. It's like, that's what I was doing. And I can pick up essentially where I left off. So it gives you the ability and the flexibility to essentially use the program how you need to use it, not how somebody thinks you should use it. Because a lot of the other software out there is people who have no idea what we do, right? So there's all these different aspects of being a landman and all of these different roles that we have to play. And again, there's only so many of us, and all of us are working for companies, and our bandwidth is so short that having things like the back button are huge. All of the jurisdictions in one platform. So we currently work in 13 jurisdictions, and it's seamless. I don't have to exit one jurisdiction to come into another jurisdiction. I can filter to one jurisdiction. Their filtering is impressive in its amount of options. And then the API integrations. So the API I am new to, and again, it's like a scripted phone call. And so many of you might not know this about me, but I started as a geologist, and in that geology space, I did a lot of work with data. And so when I get into databases, I like them to be right, consistent, complete. And the ability to have the API integration allows me to see what my data looks like, as opposed to just having an interface. Next slide. So, oh yeah. So, you like this. You can go to the next slide. But we don't have a map? I'm doing a map.
We'll show you a map.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to go to the map.
Yeah, go back for a minute.
Okay.
Well, let's see what this says. Apologies. So the ability to add features and functionality requests in a reasonable time frame. So for one thing, and this is a conversation Toby and I had early on before Sean and Izzy joined. I said to Toby very early on, I said, it's clear to me that this program was designed and developed for Western Australia. And so when it came to North America, it was in Western Australia, tenements are managed at a project size scale. They would be the equivalent of what a project is in North America. So we have projects that say have 3,000 claims in it. That would be the equivalent of a tenement in, or 2 or maybe 5 at most in Western Australia. And so the bulk action completion is an outcome of commentary of like, listen, I don't need to have a program that tells me I have over 12,000 actions to complete. I need 12. And so being able to have the bulk actions completed has been a huge, and this has been feedback direct to Toby, like this needs to change. And he's like, we're on it. Collaboration, mapping new jurisdictions. So the company that I work for, and many of you work for companies where you have geologists who are collectors of property. I work for that company. And we have a lot of property in the last year and a half. We've doubled the size of our portfolio. And so we went from, I think originally 4 jurisdictions to, I believe we're at 13. PX4 has done the build out for us on several of those jurisdictions. I believe we did Ontario to start with, Finland, Sweden, DRC, Namibia,
Zambia.
Yeah,
Zambia.
Map we can show the jury.
Yeah, so that has been huge because, again, you don't have somebody telling you how it should be. You're able to tell the people who are providing your software what it needs to look like, which is a huge difference. Next slide. Project module updates. Yeah, so many of our again, so when we started in the system, we have, I don't even know how many authorities we have at this point, but we needed to be able to manage them at a project level. So again, through back and forth conversation with Toby, originally Ryan, ultimately Kirsten, and then Sean and Izzy, we moved up to the development of actions. This will be coming in a release that all of the actions. So I have a property right now that has 3,174 claims, and it sits in Quebec. And in Quebec, there's certain actions that, because of the way it's mapped and the check boxes that you need, each one of those actions to renew it creates 3 actions times 3,174. No. I'm like, we need to roll these up onto the project level pane. So coming soon, every action that has a common date will list once instead of multiple actions per authority. So again, feedback directly from us to them.
You'll have the option.
Yeah, so the option, you don't have to do it, but if you want to do it, you'll be able to.
Okay, other features.
Yeah, so in some of the collaboration we have with PX4, manage lists for the agencies. This is just for us. A lot of times it's important for us to know the agency that we're dealing with, and because we're across 14 jurisdictions, we don't always know that. So if we just have an agency note, we've added audit columns to the API for our projects, actions, authorities, and stakeholders. Oh, this one was a big one because, again, we're in so many jurisdictions, and this always becomes a question. How is your project projected? So when you're in a GIS space, where are you? So we capture everything in EPSG, just regular lat long. And so, but once we get down to the project scale, we want the project geos to know how we're looking at their data and what coordinate system it's in. So we've captured that. We've created generic placeholders for a few jurisdictions before we do a full build out, because we're not exactly sure if we're going to be there. We have a few that we're getting ready to leave. I think we did generic for South Korea and Greenland and Saskatchewan. And then enforce localization of dates. This is, what date is the date? Yeah, when you're in the United States, it's month, day, year. When you're in Australia, it's day, month, year. When you're in Quebec, it's year, month, day. And so we've done standardization of dates. We use the 3-letter code for the month. Day first, month is a 3-letter code, and then the year.
And then next slide, we just kind of walk through some issues you brought to us and what solution we came to. So you already talked about going into a new jurisdiction, not knowing if you're going to be fully in that jurisdiction, but just needing generic licenses.
Yeah, so we started Sweden and the DRC, and to be clear, these jurisdictions can be complicated. DRC is proving to be an incredibly complex jurisdiction because they appear to create their rules and regulations in a obstacle course manner, so that failure to get through the obstacle course results in penalties. And that's kind of how their system is designed. So it's like, okay, we've got to find all of those. Claire, who works with me, works with PX4 and their scripting team on a pretty regular basis on the back and forth on getting these jurisdictions built. But I think we just launched Sweden not too long ago. We're getting ready to finish DRC. But then, again, because it takes so much time, and it's not so much time, in my world, it's like forever, but it's not that long. I think 3 months has been the longest it's taken us, maybe, with the DRC. And in that time frame, they at least give me option to the generic, so I can at least start to get my licenses in there, so I don't have things stacking up. So again, it's this listening to how we use the program and how we do our workflows, as opposed to coming at it from the opposite direction of like, this is how we think you should do your work. Next slide. Slow loading times with thousands of authorities and actions required in the portfolio. So the bulk workflow actions and the pagination list pages and other loading optimizations. I have to give a shout out to Holly, because I used to say this at tech all the time. So couple things. Most of my conversations with Sean and Izzy start out with, so a couple things. And we get to a solution. So, this one is really important for us because it creates an internal tracking mechanism. So, we decided that we needed more flexibility on the dates. So when you're adding a project, you have the ability now to put in the internal. You can select internal, approved, inactive, and archived. And you also have the ability to put dates for all of those. So it's important for us at the business development end to understand when we started talking about something. And then the approved date is when we actually took an action. We either acquired the property, we submitted an application, or we completed a deal. And then we also want to keep track of those back end metrics around when did the status of that project change? When did it become inactive? We've elected internally to do no more work on it. And when did it get archived? That's when we've said it was in our portfolio and now we have no more rights and we've archived it entirely. We still want to capture all that data and we still want to know what those timelines are. So they added inactive and archived, as well as the date fields for those.
And we'll talk a little bit about the GeoServer. We don't have a screenshot of your GeoServer for privacy purposes and all that stuff. But if you want to talk a little bit about why you needed a GeoServer and that setup.
So again, and y'all know this because y'all work with geologists. Geologists love property. Most geologists love to make their own maps, and most geologists make the worst maps from a land standpoint ever. And so much so that oftentimes you're like, I'm curious, where did you get this shape? I'm curious. This appears to maybe be the property I think you want to talk about, but I'm not quite sure because it doesn't look just right. And so what we've decided internally is that the land department controls the shapes. And the way that we control those shapes is we built, again, with PX4, we told them that we needed to have a GeoServer so that we can serve the shapes to the rest of our company. We all work remotely. The communication flow isn't always that fantastic, but the GeoServer allows us to build in one source of the truth. That's where they get their shapes. And we know because we track and manage the shapes that is the shape they need to use.
Okay. I'm going to go into APIs and I will show some of the dashboards that you've created.
Yeah, so the APIs, so I don't know if y'all are familiar with Cobalt Metals. So Cobalt has a bit of a different approach to exploration. They're very data focused and they want to spend a lot of money on exploration. So we do. On early exploration, mid-level exploration. We have an asset in Zambia that's moving towards mine development. But in all of this, there's all of these data pieces, and Cobalt is very data-centric. They want to have data that they can analyze and evaluate and essentially curate. And so metrics are hugely important to our company. And so we use the API to pull metrics on how did the size of the portfolio change over time. So from 2019 to 2026, how many assets did we add in each jurisdiction? How much area do we have? So all of this is derived from our ability to pull the API data. Go to the next one. Everybody wants to know where it is, and so we also, and again, this is, I'm just talking about it. This is due to the API integration and the work with Kate Fugate at the company that I work with. She takes the API data and makes it visual, because at the end of the day, most of us are visual. And so we're able to see where the projects are on a map, which jurisdiction we're in, and then just little cards on each one of the project, what kind of deal we have, how many licenses, what's the area, which entity. Right now, the company, I think we have over 47 entities that we stake and manage property under. So we have to be able to keep track of all that information. And we also go down to, because of the way that the API is integrated, we can look at and build visualizations of our data at the project level, the authority level, the action level, ownership, pretty much anything that we want to look at and tease a bit more. Is there one more slide? Okay.
Consequence of an action, which was your idea.
Go back on that one. So the other reason why the API integration has been super important for us is going back to the bandwidth piece. So right now I have 3 people. There's myself, Jack, and Claire, and we manage right now, I think we're at about 6.5 million acres under management by us, where we need to track obligations. We need to, essentially, the way that I've broken down the job is we need to research, we need to acquire, we need to maintain, we need to permit, and we need to comply. And so that's the task for 3 people. When we get to the management piece and the maintenance piece of all of the land, I want to know that it's right. And so what I can do, of course, with Claude, my new best friend, is I can take the API integration data, and because the way we have it connected with our ops database, I can then go in and do QA QC, as simple as tell me where I don't have fields filled out. And so having the data in a format that you can then pick it up and utilize it in other ways, especially for me to make sure that the data that's in is correct and that it's being maintained correctly, and that we're not missing anything. It tests both our system, and it's a outside of PX4 test for them, because what happens is when I come across things that are wrong on my side, I get a hold of Sean and like, hey, I don't know why it's showing up this way. And so again, we have that back and forth.
And then just a little bit about consequence of an action, because that was your idea.
So consequences of an action. So again, you're all probably familiar with the dashboard. The dashboard concept in PX4 is it tells you the amount of actions you have due and upcoming. And I'm like, I know what I'm already missing. So like, please don't tell me that. What I really need to know is what absolutely has to happen, or bad things are going to happen. Where am I going to lose property? So Sean and I work back and forth through this. And so in these actions, there is now the ability to select like that. This is an absolute, like if you fail at this, you will lose property. And so going in with the premise that of all the things we do at land as land managers, our number one responsibility is to not lose property. And so this highlights where those opportunities to lose property are. It puts it in a very, very like, do this or you're going to fail.
Right. We talked a little bit about project module updates. I don't know. We don't necessarily need to go through.
Yeah,
this
so
again.
the bulk handling of actions, being able to manage the actions at the project level, GIS display at the project level. Oh, this is one of my favorites, pinned notes. So I don't know if you guys, if anybody uses this, but at both the project level and the authority level, there's a little push pin. And it's a little sticky note. And on that sticky note, you can write whatever you want on it. And it stays in that display, so you see it all the time. So for me, I sometimes like to know why we picked this property up in the first place, like what's its history. And so I'm able to put in the reasoning, like this is why we picked it up. And it's just a really, like, that's what I use it for. I make a really quick note, and then those notes stay. And if I need to add to it, I can. And then when we go to, say, divest from a property and archive it completely, all of that information comes with it. And if it, because this never happens, if that property happens to show up again in a different name, then we understand why we picked it up and what hypothesis we tested in relation to it from a geologic standpoint. So that if somebody new comes in, you know, you get a new geologist who comes in and they're like, oh my God, this is an amazing property. And you're like, yeah, we've looked at it 5 times already, because that never happens either. You at least have all of the notes and you've captured all of that history. Expenditures and work program information cards, same. We need to know on so many of the jurisdictions, we need to know if we've met the spend and the work requirement. So those features have been added, and I love them. It's because, again, more data points.
And then lastly, just about the jurisdictions map.
Yeah. So these guys have been busy. Arizona, Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Zambia, Finland, Sweden, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Yeah, and all vastly different. This is another thing I really appreciate about PX4. Different languages. Finnish might want to be on the list, right? Different languages, different ways in which countries and jurisdictions evaluate and make their minerals accessible to for their own economic benefit, and a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences, and each one of those needs to be mapped and scripted in a different manner. And PX4 has been phenomenal in their ability to capture the essence of this so that we can get them into a program so that we can manage an entire portfolio in one view, as opposed to leaving North America and going into an Africa platform, or going into like a Western Australia and Australia platform. So that's huge for us. One place, you get to see it all.
All right, and now that's it. Looking for Q&A.
That's it.
Thank you, Leslie. That's good.
And no questions? How much work have you done with companies that are already really integrated in the system and moving up over into PS4? I would imagine that's fairly new, but sometimes we stick with systems that are uncomfortable because it's uncomfortable to switch. So, what's your experience with that rather than just starting from the ground up?
Yeah, great question.
So I'll take
For your job.
Yeah, that's pretty much why we hired John. So a lot of the clients, especially in North America, that we have brought over were leaving Landfolio. So that is not new. The exports from Landfolio are completely different for each customer. So we have a process of sitting down and mapping what fields need to be brought into PX4. And that's exactly why John got hired. We brought in one client that had thousands of claims on Ontario, and the exports from Landfolio are confusing. There's duplicates, and we had to kind of sit and make sense of this data and actually work with somebody who understands how to migrate data and map all those things in the correct place. So now we have a bit more of a process on how we do that. And it's one of the biggest kind of selling points for us. We understand people have been using Landfolio for so long. and they don't want to lose their data. So it's really about the integrity of the data. How do we maintain that as we're moving it into our system?
I've had Excel spreadsheets, I've had keepers in PDFs of documents from like the Civil War time. Like, I've had see a lot. So I expect that if you come on, I'd be more than capable of being you on board to PX4.
Yeah, and so I can also talk a little bit about historical processes and also talk a little bit about future processes as well. So historically, we kind of said, we'll sit down with your team and we would sign a contract, get ready to rock and roll, and we dive into the data. That opened us up to some challenges where you don't necessarily understand the complexity of the data until you're at the point where you're ready to migrate.
About your design.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've kind of pulled that back a little bit, and now we've got a bit more rigor around, we really sit down with the client to really understand the data before we jump into bed together and make sure that we're both really aligned with time frames, with expectations, and with the complexity of different data sets as well. I know given the types of organizations we have here, a lot of you will be using Landfolio. So every Landfolio instance is completely different. And so there is complexity in that, and there is some standardization that needs to happen from that. So then talking about the future, what we're moving towards is an AI-enabled migration process where your Excel spreadsheets and the data that's coming out of your system in whatever format and whatever setup that you've instigated and implemented in whatever system you've currently got, because oftentimes people will just have their own spreadsheets and things they've built. We've been building an AI migration tool that then standardizes and migrates that data into the templates that we need to populate the PX4 system. So at the moment, that's been driven a lot by John, but a lot of that process now is going to be automated. So where we're going from weeks of manual handling of your data and validation, we're moving into an AI-enabled, still human-validated process that, the AI agents are amazing in helping you deal with bulk data, but we always want the individual to sign off and validate that data. But so that's the process we've now moved towards, where we've got tools that are now being utilized to assist you in that migration process. We'll talk a little bit more about some of those tools that are coming up as well, but something else that's really exciting that we've been working on for a long time is the ability to extract data from claim documentation and from agreements. So often, if we draw a line in the sand about a point in time, you look back at your portfolio, you'll have thousands of claims, hundreds or thousands of agreements that you've got in place. So oftentimes a lot of the data from those agreements and those claims is already in a system. Oftentimes it's not. And we've seen it all on the way that agreement data and things like that is still oftentimes it's just a PDF or a document in a file somewhere that's not even a PDF. So the tool that we've also been working on for the last 2 years, and it's obviously accelerated a lot recently, is an AI extraction tool. So if you've got a new agreement that you enter into, or you pick up a whole new bunch of claims, we've got a tool that can actually scan that agreement, extract out both the agreement data, so title, reference, parties, dates, and things like that, but also all of your obligations in that agreement. So when a payment's due, when does a renewal happen, what are your access conditions? And that again then generates a set of actions and conditions that you then validate, and then the system populates automatically with all of that data. So a lot of the processes we've been looking at historically are pretty manual, but with the explosion of technology, even in the last couple of months, the capability of a lot of those tools now to take you out of an existing system and migrate into a system like PX4 without a lot of the bloodshed and tears and late nights and things like that is really incredible. So there's no denying that we did stumble upon some challenges with some bigger clients coming on in that space. We've changed our processes, we've matured in our processes, but also in the tech that we're using to do that is now really, really exciting. And we'll talk more a little bit about that starts and that, but a really good question. The system and the core of the system is that jurisdictional specificity. The way your system is set up in terms of that workflow process is the same if you're in Nevada, you're in Nevada. So that's, kind of breaks down that barrier of, well, how do you set your system up versus how somebody else has. So the workflows that we build will actually be built against the legislation that was granted at the time. So depending on the jurisdictions you're in, there'll be a whole suite of available workflows within that jurisdiction. Sometimes there are gaps, and again, if there are particular claim types or authority types that don't exist within a jurisdiction you operate in, there's a collaborative process to make sure that we can have full coverage of the types of workflows you need. But if you're in Nevada and you've got, maybe not Nevada, if you're in Arizona and you've got both BLM and state-specific claims, there are different workflows in the system based on the different legislation that drives those for Wales. Be like New South Wales, there is 26 different workflows for different licenses based on 1907 legislation, 1967 legislation, and the 2022 Act. So all of those workflows all those licenses still exist. So we've had to build workflows for all of them.
That's also what the gateway does. When you put in your authority number into the gateway, it retrieves all that information from the BLM or from the state. And then PX4 is this little magic with the workflows, and it's like, okay, you need to renew this type of agreement. You need to, this claim will expire in 3 years and instead of 5 years or something like that. All that is all automated for you. It just pops into your dash for you.
What we're doing now is we collated all of the feedback we heard in the breakout sessions and we put them on a slide. So we're just going to go through what we heard for the different breakout groups. So in Nevada, we heard what was working is they like the dates format. They like being tied into the gateway with bulk updates, the intuitive navigation and linked entities, and the document library tied to historical data was big for them. What's not working for them is they would like to see county level data and mining claim maps. Future asks, looking for a pulling in and pulling out integration to ArcGIS, including shapes and geo packages. They'd like to be able to calculate royalty payments, and an email integration that includes emails not to be tracked as well. So you can select what is pulled in and not pulled in.
Right.
And then a link to NDOM and all that data getting pulled in.
Excellent.
All right, next. BLM, who wants to take this last year? Last year. I'll take it.
So that was my section. What's working? Generally, our gateway serves as a good foundation for getting data in there. But future asks were evidence of paid claims because of the way the BLM system works. Tech can speak a little more to that, but it's essentially like creating an audit workflow so that you have some evidence that, yes, I submitted payment. Yes, this is the documentation. Yes, it got stamped. I filed it with the BLM. This is the date. This is when I called the accessor. And then having the action to send it to the county as well. I think that fulfills the constructive notice requirement that they've got. As well as where to send the claim filing, shortcuts for the mailing address for the recorder offices for the various jurisdictions and counties, as well as contact information, phone number, email, all that sort of thing. Seth brought up a point where the Colorado VLM office changed their office location and they sent their claims to the old office. So knowing where the new office is and our team to keep that up to date so that you're always sending it to the right place. Then kind of a tutorial sort of thing for how to send claim filings for non-landmen in your organization. So if all of your you got an account, and they handle the money stuff, you can give them access to a limited section of PX4 so they don't have to see all the ArcGIS, the claim tenement stuff. They just see, these are all the things that we have to pay. This is the amount. This is where we send it to. And this is how you record it so that all the information is auditable and maintained tools. Nice. Then after that, see claim package shapes at the project level, not from the BLM. So the BLM is a little notorious for kind of screwing up. So there have been a couple times where we'll import the shapes from the BLM and the client will give us their ArcGIS shapes, and they'll have a nice square of all of their claims, and the information we pull in from the BLM has a nice square, and then there's a chunk taken out, and it's over here, and there's another chunk that's taken out over here, and it's just all sorts of messed up. Right now, you can import shape files at the authority level, but that doesn't roll up into the project level, so you can't import your own your own shapefile on the project level to have everything organized just yet. That's relies 100% on the BLO currently. Then payment by affidavit groups. So that's actually a feature that we're probably going to be talking about in the next couple slides. But rolling up all those costs so that you can group your project into affidavit groups and then have that all summed so that you can split out your claim payments by affidavit groups instead of paying 3,000 claims all at once. You can split it up in this section, this county's affidavit group, so you send it off to that county, so on and so forth. And then the map interface that we've talked about a little bit, but also with links to directly view the information in MLRS, as well as all of the associated links. So the vision is you have a map, you click on the square or the shapefile, and there's like a little pop-up there that has all that information in there that's easily accessible. You can click on it to bring you to the dashboard, but it's got all those sort of quick links and quick information there. And then the final thing are calculations on list view. So like for authorities, the use case would be like, I need to know how, here it was how many acres I have in X county. So jurisdictionally, it's like mid. Then you would go in and filter by local governance, I think is what it's called in PX4. Was that right? Yeah. And that would be like the county level. So you click on Elko County. That would shuffle all of your lists, filter it just to Elko County. And then at the bottom, you have a little thing that's like sum 300 acres, total expenditures $3,000 or something like that, so that it's nice and easy to see that at a glance instead of having to use an API to get that data out of PX4 or export it into a spreadsheet and mess around in Excel. It just does it for you. And that's it for BLM.
Awesome, right? International. I don't know if you want to wait until. No, we're good. Just go.
If you could just go back one slide, one of the things that I'll be talking to in a little bit, particularly on that calculation view. So we're incorporating an AI-driven metric builder that is driven by real text queries. So for that last query, how many acres do I have in X county? You could actually write that in as a query, and the system will generate a report for you that you can save as a metric in your database. So I'll actually show you that in a couple of slides. But so that's one that we do currently have. So the queries can be anything. How much land do I have in Australia? What's my expected minimum expenditure in the next 12 months for this project? So using real text to query the entire database. And then when you land on queries that you like or that you're regularly having to answer, you can save them as metrics in your own dashboard. So that's one that we've been working on the last couple of months. So we'll go show some of the screenshots from that as well. On the international side of things, obviously the gateway is a foundation. Really excited there, and obviously that jurisdictional specificity continues to be the driving force and the driving value in that international capability. Maybe a little bit more granularity required on some of the workflows, which is fantastic. So again, a little bit more collaboration with some of our international clients about the level of detail they want to go into in some of those international jurisdictions. In Ontario, there was mention about trying to capture taxes and expenditure reporting. So that's something that we'll have a look at. Within Michigan, engage or tracking your landowners and being able to see your landowners is a really integral part of operating in Michigan. And we had some really good examples from Herb about some systems that already exist that have a lot of the national land parcel and landholder details. So that was really cool to see. In Chile, there is a map, like a shapefile that has to get lodged with your report. So actually having that created with the action in the system. There was taxes in Peru. We've spoken about getting Turkish in, as well as Finnish and Swedish. Within Finland and within a lot of other jurisdictions, there are specific outputs for statutory reporting. So looking to actually bring in all of those outputs as standard reports from the database as well. So some examples there were Kazakhstan, and I know Saudi Arabia is the same, Western Australia is the same. So that's really exciting there. And then in the DRC as well, obviously going that really granular level on the DRC as well to make sure we're capturing there was a couple of additional nuances captured in some periphery legislation that you wanted to capture as well. So that's
We got another slide too.
Oh, my house.
Yeah.
In terms of some other bits and pieces,
Lindy and the other folks.
excellent. Welcome back. Hope there was a good lunch. In terms of petroleum and gas work programs, I know not too many people have petroleum and gas licenses here, but some do. So we've got some exciting updates on the work programs that we want to showcase. Some generic licenses for Iceland. Provincial checklist was a really cool idea. So when you're completing a particular statutory action, having an embedded checklist that says these are all the things you need to do before you mark off that action as complete. So actually embedding those against the action, and that's a really good point that we'll talk to in this afternoon in the roadmap session as well. Expenditure tasks. So again, I think that was around capturing the process for getting expenditure over the line and making sure that the right things have been done to actually tick off on expenditure. A great idea about you've obviously got your annual reports, but then having an automated reminder that tells you when those reports go public. So it might be a couple of years down the track. And so having a bit of a reminder as to when that data is made publicly available. Not so much for the land team, but maybe more for the commercial or legal team that want to understand that. So not necessarily just for Sweden, but this was a really interesting one around being able to visualize your company ownership. So if you are a big company and you have interest in other entities, so percentage of ownership of other entities, being able to actually see a tree of information and all of the associated ownership of other companies as well. So that was a really good idea. And a couple of other things, being able to actually manipulate and manage legacy data into the database. We spoke about role-based access, which was really cool. I don't even know what EPSG coda means, but it was a GIS reference. So for those playing from home, there's a spatial requirement that's required, but we will look into what that means. More detail on local councils and dates for obligations. So that was around when you're building out a jurisdiction internally, having a couple of ideas around some dates for obligations that come out of that early on before the workflows are generated. So lots of really great ideas on the international side of things.
All right. Thanks, Toby. And now Alaska, where you guys were the busiest over here with your sticky notes.
Were we? Mm-hmm. I guess we were. Yeah, so Alaska, what's working right now is the sort of visual first claim management, seeing claims, seeing features, also mapping, just spatial organization as an anchor in PX4. So the way I'm reading this is that the coming together of the data with the spatial data in PX4, that's appreciated, and we've still got some opportunity there, but bringing them closer together is actually working well for everybody. In Alaska, especially, the UI, this was awesome to hear. The UI just instills confidence. Just when you engage with it, the sense is that it gives you some indication of what you need to do, where to go. There's not doubts right out the gate. Helps answers, what do I need to know? And then, not up on here, but I also want to note that the user group meetings was also called out as beneficial and appreciated. So for those of you who don't know, we'll talk about this later. We do have a monthly user group meeting. So where our users come together and talk about something specific in PX4. What's not working? Claim rental fees for Alaska right now. Alaska is kind of its own beast. So we're working on this, and I've been working on this with Alina in particular, but also with Emily, to try and get this ironed out in PX4. So that's in flight. Currently, there's no tracking of any borough or municipal taxes, surface property taxes, land use taxes. The list kind of goes on. There's some work for us to do there, some opportunity for us. And then there's no field level tracking of permit stipulations. So bringing together, I'm reading this is sort of like bringing together the management and then on the field operations somehow. See if there's anything for us to do in that regard. It was very interesting to learn that Landfolio, and I guess maybe we have sort of touched on this a number of times, but Landfolio has set a baseline for a lot of land people, and that baseline seems to be, it was, not my words, dreadful. working at, there's, I mean, it makes it easy for us, right? If an experience is dreadful, but it's also a goal to not make that dreadful for our users as well. So, and then future asks or financial obligation tracking for rentals, bureaus, royalties goes with what's not working. It's just not there in PX4 right now. So that's a wish list. And then field to filing permit compliance change. I saw that touched on a couple of the other slides. I think our next step at this point would be to try and correlate all of these and prioritize across PX4 what would be the most important to take on next. And then AI assisted report generation was not on the list, but that was also mentioned. Configurability for political administrative things. I thought this was super cool, a super cool idea, because every 4 years things change. Or Herb, you were talking about this as well. That's not something that PX4 can solve, but that is something that we could potentially help you to solve for your assets, in the sense that, PX4 could be built in a manner that's flexible enough to adjust to your needs as your needs adjust to the political situation in your jurisdiction. So there's a lot of thinking for us. That's a very complex problem I would love to think about and tackle.
Well, that's where you could include that above ground risk mapping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's it. Thank you guys for that. It was great feedback.
Perfect.